The New York Times speaking with more than 24 people, some of whom say they had prior romantic relationships with a Democratic candidate in Maine. At least 2 women spoke on the record describing their interactions with Graham Platner, using words like toxic, unsettling, emotionally wrenching. We should note the Times also spoke with women who described positive relationships with women. Platner has faced a slew of controversies during his rise as the presumptive challenger to Republican Senator Susan Collins. Right, we've talked about Platner and some of these controversies before, among them a tattoo with what some say is a Nazi symbol. Platner insists he did not know the meaning behind that symbol when he got it. Deleted posts on Reddit about a number of topics. And just this week, reports he sent sexually explicit text messages to other women at the beginning of his marriage to his wife. Texts that the couple has acknowledged and said they've worked through with counseling. Let me bring in Sahil Kapoor, who is joining us now from Capitol Hill. And Sahil, you have a new statement now from Platner on the allegations and specifically on comments made by one of the women quoted in this Times article.
Yeah, Hallie, we had heard whispers for days that something was about to drop, that this Times article was coming. And finally, yes, in the last few hours, we, of course, have seen it. Now, just to sum up what the allegations are, the Times leaned on 3 women they spoke to who were romantically involved with Graham Platner during his 20s and mid-30s. Some of them casually dating on and off, some of them long distance. They all say that there was some measure of toxicity and volatility in their relationship. They called him a heavy drinker that sometimes made them act out. One woman is Lindsay Fitfield, a conservative activist who called him cavalierly contemptuous of women's emotions. She said he was occasionally rough with her, sometimes grabbed her by the shoulders, and once put her in a room and closed the door, held it closed so she couldn't get out, although she did say that he never hit her or punched her. 2 other women who the Times described as Democrats in Maine were also cited. One said he, being Platner, doesn't respect women. Another had a long-distance relationship with him and accused him of heavy drinking and womanizing. Now, how is Platner responding to all of this? Let's show his statement that he sent to NBC News. Throughout this campaign, he says, I've been open about what was a very dark period in my life where I struggled with undiagnosed PTSD, too often self-medicated with alcohol, and was far from a perfect boyfriend. I take responsibility for all of that, and I wish I had been better. He goes on to say, any characterization beyond that is false, and I believe politically motivated. He says he's not proud of who he was then and believes he's a better person now. This is sort of the same point, the same argument he's made to Maine voters when previous controversies have come up, such as his offensive comments that he made on Reddit in his 20s and several years ago. Now, a Platner campaign official also pointedly pushed back on Lindsay Fitfield, the conservative activist who makes some of the harshest allegations in here, saying, quote, let's be very clear, this is a lifelong GOP operative who's dedicated her career to electing Republicans, end quote. We should note she has not dated Platner in 11 years. And the Times also spoke to several other women who Mr. Platner dated and said he arranged interviews with them who described him very differently. One of them said he was a great boyfriend, that he was super kind. Now, one person who has nothing kind to say about Graham Platner is the Democratic Senator John Fetterman, who has repeatedly clashed and feuded with Platner in public. I spoke to Fetterman just in the last hour or so. Let's play what he said. Do you think this is disqualifying behavior from what you've read, or do you think he's still...
Well, that's really up to Maine's voters to do that. But what I'm saying, a guy that's been clearly lying and started his campaign about a Nazi tattoo, and now continuing now to women have came forward to say that he is now engaging in abusive behavior that left him afraid.
And Fetterman also told me that he still does not intend to endorse any candidate in the race between Platner and the Republican Susan Collins. And he did wonder whether other Democrats who have supported Platner are going to be okay with this.
Sahil, let me ask you this, too, because just stepping back, pulling back here, the reason why there is just a white-hot spotlight on this Senate race in Maine is because it is seen by many Democrats as like the race that they're going to have to win if they want to try to take back control of the Senate. And for Republicans, they'll have to defend with Senator Collins there if they want to keep control of the Senate come November. It's a big deal.
Oh, it's absolutely essential, Hallie. There is no viable path to Democrats taking back the Senate without winning Maine. That's the only blue-leaning state on the map. Susan Collins has defied gravity in that state, won in difficult cycles, and defied Democratic attempts to defeat her for many years. But yes, Democrats need 4 seats, need to net gain 4 seats this fall in order to win control of the Senate. And it's difficult to see how they get there without Maine. Not impossible. They have to win in red states, and solidly red states that Donald Trump won by double digits to have a shot at that 4. But if they can't win in Maine, how are they going to have a shot in Iowa, in Ohio, in Texas, which are much tougher politically, Hallie?
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.